Let me tell you what a ban on foreign-owned Canadian housing doesn't do. What it doesn't do is solve a Canadian housing crisis. The Canadian home buyers ban is back in the news again because there were some revisions made as per the last budget, even though it was only rolled out in January of this year. Now this shouldn't shock anybody because when it was rolled out, it wasn't too well thought out. Let's look at some of the revisions that were made and talk about why they're probably a good thing, but in the overall picture, is going to do nothing to solve the Canadian housing crisis. Although if I had my guess, 2 years from now, the articles are probably going to say that this program was a raging success. Let's first talk about what this home buyers ban was supposed to achieve. In the last couple years during the pandemic, there was a very loud percentage of the population that was saying all of these homes were being driven up in price because of foreigners coming in and buying these houses and scooping up the inventory and of course leaving them vacant. And that was an awful and terrible thing. That's the reason why housing prices were skyrocketing so high and so fast. But number one, is that actually true? And number two, does that home buyers ban actually achieve its goal? What I find really funny about the way that this ban was originally structured was that a foreign buyer could come and buy a fourplex, but they couldn't come here and build one. The stats when it comes to foreign home ownership are all over the place. Some reports say that in some markets is as high as 5%. That's really, really unlikely. In fact, the average is probably more around the 1 to 2%, maybe possibly even below the 1% marker. Foreign home ownership does exist in Canada, but it doesn't exist in a capacity where it significantly influences the price of home ownership. I mean, look for example during the pandemic, the time when housing prices were arguably rising the fastest. That was during a time when foreign home ownership wasn't really possible anyway because the borders were shut down. So during the time when the borders were shut down, we saw the fastest growth in home prices. So clearly there's something else at play. Now on this channel before, we talked about the main reason why prices are being driven up so fast is that relationship between supply, the actual amount of houses coming onto the market, and then demand, the amount of people that are actively seeking home ownership or some kind of housing in the event of rents. So how does the Canadian home buyers ban actually affect that dynamic? Well, some people say it positively affects it because what you're doing is you're restricting demand. You're preventing some of these foreign buyers from occupying a property while not being in Canada. Is that really true though? I mean, look at the amount of exceptions that were introduced along with the bill. You had international students who, as long as they met certain requirements, were able to purchase a home. Of course, no more than $500,000. You had an entire array of temp workers that were allowed to also purchase homes. You had diplomats and consular staff and members of international organizations living in Canada. You had foreign nationals, you had people fleeing conflict, refugees, and so on. That is on top of that, including all the other exceptions as well. Like if you were buying a property that had 4 or more units, or if you were buying a vacation home, like a cabin or a cottage. So with all those exemptions, who was actually blocked out from buying a home? Well, in actuality, the people who shouldn't have been. For instance, there was a ton of foreign investment that was being poured into Canada for the development of homes to create new inventory for Canadians to live in. I mean, is it really that shocking that American corporations were here in Canada building homes trying to make a profit? No, of course not. And we want them to be here building homes and increasing the inventory. That's something that every Canadian should be wanting. Who cares if they make a profit? But ever since this ban has come into effect in the last 2 to 3 months, there have been hundreds, if not thousands of projects that have been indefinitely postponed, meaning those houses that would have otherwise existed will no longer come to market. Now, with the most recent revisions of this ban, that's been stripped away. Foreign buyers can now come and purchase vacant land with the intention or the purposes of building Canadian housing. So at least that's been resolved. Now, is all of these builders and investors going to come back? No, probably not. I mean, you literally just had the leader of a country say, hey, you're not welcome here. Talk about a business risk. On top of that, there's been a few other revisions. For example, work permit holders. The federal government got a lot of criticism over this home buyers ban because it directly contradicted what the federal's initiatives were for immigration. Now, if you have at least 183 days left on your work permit, you'll be exempt from the home buyers ban. And then, of course, you also have changes to the corporation's foreign control threshold that was previously at 3% and now rests at 10%. Under the original ban, no Canadian company could have 3% foreign ownership. And where they got that number from, I have no idea. They must have pulled that out of their butts.
Did you go to school?
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you can prove that 7 times 13 is 28?
Well, it's gotta be.
Because what large Canadian home builder, what large Canadian developer has not at some point thought about bringing on investment, foreign or not, particularly from the US, to grow and develop their presence in the Canadian market. So then suddenly, with this foreign home buyers ban, you had a whole slew of builders and developers that, because they had taken on investment previously, were no longer capable of servicing the Canadian market. This is why I think the ban of foreign home ownership does less than nothing. In fact, it probably does more harm than good. Because let's think about this for a second. We were dealing with a very, very small percentage foreign homeowners in the Canadian population. And then on top of that, we went and made a ton of exemptions within that small category. So who were we actually banning? And then on top of that, we went and made even more exemptions in what and how they could buy. And in the process of doing all of that, we scared away developers and investors that were here in Canada developing inventory for the housing market. So if anything, this Canadian home buyers ban, we've gone backwards.